Well, September is already here, which means we're going to start thinking about harvesting season and looking forward to 2016. So to get there, let's get to our From the Field interview. Today, Mark Grunmeyer is joining us again. Mark, how are things going for you?
Hi, Liz. Things are going pretty well. It's really been a very, very good growing season for us.
Well, as I said, September is already here, and the guys are going to be getting ready to get the combines and hit the fields. But of course, we also have to talk about what's going on for 2016 and preventing things that happened this year and combating things. Let's just start there. Let's start with, what is it you're seeing in our fields so far for this year?
Well, right now, Liz, soybeans seem to be taking kind of the front portion of things here, and we're seeing an awful lot of sudden death syndrome and even white mold out there right now. In the corn fields, definitely northern corn leaf blight has been showing up in a lot of the area fields. And the big thing is we're seeing a growing number, a lot of just really weedy fields out there. Well, the good news is that most of those situations can be remedied through seed selection. Planting tolerant varieties or avoiding very susceptible varieties is the most effective way to reduce yield losses. We need to be sure that we're taking the ratings and checking those ratings out in the seed product guides as we're going through those and assigning them to a particular field. And even weeds can be managed through careful seed selection. That's why Latham's sales of Liberty soybean products have doubled over the last couple of years. We really expect that trend to continue for 2016.
Well, Mark, let's focus a little bit on seed selection and some tips. What are some tips for our farmers in combating white mold with their seed selection?
Well, most likely you're not going to be able to do anything for any of the white mold that you see out there right now. Possibly, maybe a foliar fungicide if most of the field isn't affected. So really what you're doing is identify those fields where white mold is right now and start selecting soybean lines that in the future will have a very, very good tolerance to that disease. And also maybe changing some management practices. It's not just all about seed selection. We have to maybe sometimes do some other things that we're not familiar with or haven't been familiar with a long time. Things like, maybe cultivating or maybe even planting in some wider rows. All of those things can really help sometimes with soybean white mold.
And if our farmers are seeing white mold affecting their soybean plants, what is it they can do then?
Well, really, we're kind of talking about harvest here, Liz, and so one of the things that we really need to do is make sure that there's really three key points with white mold at harvest time. Number one, you want to avoid harvesting those disease-infected fields before you harvest your clean fields. I mean, the clean fields got to get combined first. Leave those really disease-infested fields for last. Then clean your combine out thoroughly after you've harvested those disease-infected fields. It's really important to clean them out before you move to a field that has no history of the disease. And then if white mold is maybe restricted just kind of to a portion of a field, make sure that you combine that area last as well and get the rest of the field cleaned up.
Now, Mark, we talked about the white mold, but what about SDS? Has that been out and about this season too?
Yeah, very much. Probably more so, Liz, than even the white mold. I've seen a lot of sudden death syndrome. Just understanding the extent of the infection in each field is really key to effectively managing that disease for the future. Future management tactics include, maybe reducing the soil compaction, planting fields with a history of sudden death towards the end of a planting schedule when soils may be warmer and drier, and then testing for the presence of soybean cyst nematodes. Most importantly, farmers should really select soybean brands for their ability to really handle that disease.
Well, I know seed selection will help on this too. What are some pointers for our farmers when dealing with SDS?
Well, no two growing years are exactly alike, so why base next year's crop solely on this year's performance? This season across Latham's 6-state territory, we've seen how different genetics handled stress from late planting, cool temperatures, too much moisture, wind, hail, and all those things. In corn, roots and stalk strength were put to the test, and we really like to see farmers diversifying their seed portfolio. It's really, really important. At Latham High-Tech Seeds, we believe in planting at least 4 to 6 different Latham numbers for added protection. I've said it before, but it's worth repeating. Genetics make yield, but traits protect that yield.
Well, and you make a really valid point about no 2 years or even 4 years being the exact same. And we went into the spring with dry conditions, and then some areas got some precipitation, some heavy precipitation at times. Then it looked like things were going to have a great season. Well, how does all this factor into our seed selection?
Well, farmers can minimize their risk by diversifying both their genetic and their trait packages, as well as their relative maturities. Another insurance policy, if you will, is seed treatment. After all, it takes less than a bushel of soybeans to pay for the cost of seed treatment. We never know for certain if it's going to be a wet or a cool start to the season. Sometimes poorly drained soils favor the development of fungal pathogens that cause seedling diseases, which slow germination and plant growth. Seed treatments protect seedlings until they have a fairly well-established root system. They really, really help.
Mark, you talked about having a diversified program. For our farmers that are listening, is having a diversified program through various seeds brands, is that better?
Well, one of the things that we look at as far as developing seed brands and stuff like that here at Latham, as an independent family-owned company, we really believe that we're able to guarantee genetic diversity. We can provide one-stop shopping. Our independence allows us to provide farmers with an industry-leading number of corn, soybean, and even alfalfa product choices from providers including Monsanto, Bayer, BASF, Syngenta, Dow AgroSciences, and even more. So rather than switch brands, switch companies, we highly recommend that they stay within a company, hopefully ours, and then just use the diversity within that portfolio to plan their planting season.
We've really given our farmers something to think about and chew on for a week or so, Mark, before we can get back to them. Anything else that you want to tell our farmers this week?
Well, one final thing that I'd like to say is just keep in mind when you're selecting seed is to include both defensive and offensive products. Just like a football coach who's putting together a winning team, that includes both standout offensive and defensive lineups. Farmers are going to benefit from planting a very diversified lineup of corn and soybean.
Mark, it's that time to wrap things up. Any last thoughts for our farmers this week?
Well, the main point, Liz, is we're really suggesting farmers plant high-tech products to serve as kind of an insurance policy. No one can really predict what the weather will do in 2016. Farmers can minimize their risk by planting Latham's Gladiator corn hybrids and their ironclad soybeans.
Again, Mark Grunmeyer joining us from Latham Seed. Thanks, Mark, for stopping by again this week.
Thank you, Liz. Take care.